In this video, we are going to be adding a stamina bar to our character, so that way we cannot sprint indefinitely. We have our current system working, where if we hit the shift button, we slowly ramp up to full sprint speed, and if we hit shift again, we will slowly run down to full walking speed. And we could sprint indefinitely because there's nothing limiting it. What we're going to do is create a stamina value in our player character, and then we're going to hook it up so that way the player can be limited for how long they can sprint for. Now, our character is currently set up with two things. We have a controller, which takes the input and passes it along to our player, and then we have our character, which takes that input and does something with it. We should not have to do anything inside of our controller, because all our controller is doing is passing along if we are pressing or unpressing the button, basically, if we want to sprint or not. So we can go ahead and just work inside of our character. So we need to think about how we want to do this. Well, we're going to need a stamina. So let's go ahead and just add a variable, and we'll call it stamina. And we'll go ahead and make this an integer. Let's go ahead and compile and save. And let's set this to something like 10. You kind of need to figure out what you're going to do before you do anything, because it's important as you're designing. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 10 points of stamina. We're going to drain 1 stamina per half a second. This will basically give a 5-second sprint. And we're going to set it up like this just because it'll make it a little bit easier. Keep in mind we do have in our timeline here a 1 second, 2 second ramp up. Let's go ahead and change this to 1 second. Just make it simpler. And the nice thing is it's really easy to do that. We change our length to 1 second. Make sure we have a 0 and a 1 value. There we go. And now, if we test this, we should be able to go to full sprint speed in 1 second. There we go. Instead of 2 seconds. So we have a ramp up and down for sprint of now 1 second. And I probably shouldn't have closed that. Okay. So 0 to 1 is going to be ramping up to full speed. And then we should have basically 5 seconds. 4 to 5 seconds of full sprinting, and then we'll ramp back down once we run out of sprinting speed. So we're going to have to figure out how to integrate this in here. If we just had it as a toggle and we didn't have our timeline here, it might be a little easier, but of course, we're going to work within our existing system, and we're going to integrate it. We have our stamina, and we have a value. So we're going to need to make sure that we can go up and down. We're going to use timers to tick every half a second, so that way not only can we adjust the tick rate, maybe we want it to go down every second. Actually, why don't we do it every second? We're going to go ahead and set this up where it'll be every second instead of half a second. I made a change. And the nice thing is with timers, when we implement this, you'll be able to adjust that. And we'll adjust the amount of stamina you get back automatically. We'll make variables for that. And let's go ahead and implement it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is somehow know if we have the correct amount of stamina to sprint. Now this portion here, which is basically if we're sprinting, play our timeline and adjust our speed, we shouldn't have to change. This is going to happen either sprinting up or winding down to the walk, no matter what. It's this portion in here, after we've determined if we're sprinting or not, that we're going to have to adjust. So let's go ahead and just make some room. We'll go ahead and move this to the left, and let's go ahead and unhook these for now. And we'll go ahead and move over, and we'll give ourselves some room to play with. So like I said, we're going to want to see if we want to sprint based on our stamina. So let's get our stamina value, and let's see if it's greater than or equal to another value. And we'll do an if. And keep in mind the true is if we want to sprint. Now the false is we're no longer sprinting. We're going to ramp down, and we're not going to care if we have stamina or not when we're not sprinting. So we're only going to want this to be implemented on our true function. So we'll move this up here. We'll give a little bit of organization maybe, like that. We'll do something like that. Now, right now you'll notice we have nothing plugged into our value. We're going to want to have some form of value. How much drain are we going to want not necessarily how much drain. We'll keep drain and minimum stamina required to sprint differently. How much stamina are we going to require to sprint? And that's going to be based on how much stamina we're going to drain and how much stamina we're going to give back, various values. Let's set this up to 1 just to be safe, because we're going to require at least 1 point of stamina in order for them to sprint. Actually, let's set this to 2. I'm going to do this 10 points of stamina, 2 points of stamina drain per second, 5 seconds total sprinting. That's going to be my math. So we're going to do 2. So as long as we have 2 points of stamina and we're telling it to branch, we're going to go ahead and go to our true section here. Now, what do we want to do when it's true? Well, we've already got something in place here. We're just going to want to play our sprint speed. So from start, we're going to go ahead and play our sprinting. Now, at this point in time, we're going to play our sprinting. It's going to run through. We're going to need to do something in order to reduce our stamina now. We're going to use the tick event. The tick event is basically the timer instead of a tick. A tick is going to fire frame dependent. 60 frames per second, 60 ticks. If we fire off our timer at half a second or 1 second, it's going to do its best to fire off at that time period once. And that's something we want, because we're going to want to fire off roughly every 1 second is what we've chosen. Different games have different tick rates. You'll find a lot of, like your massively multiplayer games, like the classic EverQuest had a 3-second global tick, for example. And you have different things you can play with. But we're going to go with 1 second. Now, to keep things clean and organized, think about how you can separate things and compartmentalize. So in this case, we have our sprint, which is separate than our crouch and all our other movement code. Now, as part of this stamina system, well, we have losing stamina, gaining stamina, and then sprinting itself. So let's keep the losing and the gaining stamina, or the increase or decrease, separately. So we'll go ahead and add in custom events for that right now. And we'll call one decrease stamina, which I didn't even come close to spelling that correctly. Decrease stamina, there we go. And since we're here, we'll add another custom event. We'll call this one increase stamina. The nice part about doing something like this is, let's say later on you want to allow your player to use stamina, maybe for a special ability. You can go ahead and, let's say you're using 2 points of stamina per second to sprint, and then they activate something like a shield, which drains 1 point of stamina per second. Well, the nice thing is, because this event is going to use variables to decrease, as long as you adjust your variable, it's going to decrease it based on the variable amount. And so now all you're going to have to worry about later on is, okay, our sprint will drain 2. Our stamina will drain 1. And as long as you're adjusting and decreasing your variables, then these events will never have to be changed. They're just simply going to handle based on what you want to do. So, decreasing stamina. This should be pretty simple. We're going to take our stamina and we're going to set it. We're going to set it to our current stamina value. We're going to get that and we're going to subtract an integer from it. Now, what integer should we do? Well, let's go ahead and make a new variable. We'll call this stamina. Not stamina drain. Yeah, we're going to call this sprint stamina drain. And we'll make this an integer. We'll set this to 2. We're going to want to drain 2 every time we drain it, and we'll drop it into here. So now we have a variable set up. We're going to go ahead and subtract this, and there we go. Every time we call decrease stamina, we're going to reduce our stamina value by 2. Now we're going to want to do an if check. Now we want to see, should we continue decreasing? Because we're not going to want it to go below 0, for example. And if we hit 0, are we going to want to have anything to happen? So let's do a check. Always try to do a less than or equal or greater than or equal if possible, because you never know. Maybe for some reason you end up going below 0, and if you do an equal to, like if my stamina is 0, then obviously I'm out of stamina and I'm going to want to stop doing etc. and for some reason, either your player's hacking or you just have some really funky math that happens to time up correctly, you go to -1 on your stamina, your game is not going to know what to do. And this, you're going to figure, oh, well, I'm below 0, that should count, and I should stop doing whatever. But because you didn't code for it, you didn't code safely, you're going to have an issue. So always try to do the less than just to be safe, your edge cases. So in this case, less than or equals 0, we're going to do something. What are we going to do? Well, let's see. Are we less than or equal to 0? If we are, well, we don't have enough stamina, so we're going to want to make sure our player stops running. Are we going to make it abrupt, or are we going to make it a slowdown change? No, this is something you would think about. Me personally, if I hit out of stamina, I'm going to make the player completely stop. I'm going to make them slow down. Since we have our variables set up from earlier, the nice thing is we can just copy this, paste it over here, clean it up a little bit, give ourselves a little code area there, and we would set it to our walk speed, since we've already variabilized that. That's the nice point about keeping everything in a variable. And there we go. Now we've set it up where the player will lose stamina every time we call this event. We'll check to see if they're less than or equal to, and then we'll go ahead, and if they are, we'll set their max walk speed to walking. So now immediately when they run out of stamina, they're going to stop. So this is well and handy, but we're only going to do this once. We're going to want to keep repeating it, and this is where a timer comes into effect. So our timer should trigger once our sprinting is done. What we're going to want to do here is true. We'll call decrease stamina. And actually, that's not what we want. We want to set a timer. Not by event. Okay, let's third time's a try. Set timer by function name. Here we go. Function name decrease stamina. Time, we're going to call this once every second. And now we're going to play from start. And we do not want looping. We're going to call this every second, but we're not going to want it to automatically loop. We're going to want to control when it is set. So if we have enough stamina, we're going to call the decrease stamina event after 1 second, and then we're going to play our sprinting, which apparently I moved this, so that's highly amusing. There we go. Wow, I really made that messed up, didn't I? Okay, that's a lot of fun. There we go. Put it back to normal. We're going to call our ramp up, and we're going to run at full speed. This is going to get called after 1 second, reduce the stamina, check, and then go. Now we're going to have our false here. Let's say we have stamina. We're going to want to decrease it. Now, the nice thing about this is we already have something set up to decrease. All we're going to have to do is call it again. So we'll set timer by function. Give ourselves a little bit of code cleanup and move this over. We're going to call ourself again, decrease health. We're going to call ourselves after 1 second. Now something that's important here is we need to keep track of our timers, because we should actually be clearing these before we reset them. We haven't done it yet because we have no way of doing it. Let's take our return value, promote it to a variable, and let's name it. Let's name this our timer handle. Let's call it our stamina timer handle. And this is going to keep track of any of our stamina drain or increase timers. Now that we've done that, basically this is going to loop. This is going to call itself, and as long as we have stamina left, we're going to go ahead and loop. So let's go ahead and print a string for a debug here until we set up a UI. And we'll set this up to our current stamina. Now in theory, if we've set this up correctly, and we hit play, and then we hit our shift button, 8. Okay, now it should have repeated. So what did we do wrong here? We did manage to get a drain, we did manage to get a call, and we did manage to get print. Aha! I called this decrease health instead of decrease stamina. That was silly. We'll hit play again. I'll hit shift. Top left corner, we have 8, 6, 4, 2, and then now we have 0. Because we hit 0, it runs this branch over here. Of course, we're not setting the print up. So if we were to run this, I hit shift. I'm now full speed. When it gets down to 0, it should abruptly slow me down. Now we've got a sprint with a stamina. Of course, obviously, if I hit shift again, which I'm doing now, we're not going to continue running because we have no stamina. We haven't implemented the increase version. The nice part is the increase version is pretty much this, but opposite. I know it sounds weird, the same but different, but it is. So let's go ahead and implement the increase. Let's actually copy all of this because why not? And we'll see how we can change it over to our increase version. Move it down, paste it, put it into place, and let's look at it. So this one right here, we were decreasing our stamina drain. Let's make a new variable called sprint. We'll just call one stamina regen. We'll call this one, we'll just call it stamina regen rate. How about that? And we'll go ahead and set this one up as 2. You know what? Let's go with 4. Let's make it regenerate twice as fast as you lose it. Why not? We'll set this into here. And now, we obviously don't want a minus. This should be an add. Hook that up properly. Now, every time we call increase stamina, we're going to add the stamina regenerate to stamina. We'll set it, and then we're going to check again on a branch. This time, we don't want a less than or equal. We want a greater than or equal. And we're going to want to make sure we hit greater than or equal to our maximum stamina. So again, another variable. Actually, you know what? Let's do it the more fun way. Let's set our maximum stamina to 10, which is right here. And let's go ahead and drag this off, promote to variable. We're going to rename this one maximum. We'll call this one maximum stamina. I don't want to assume a default here right now because let's say, for example, you prepare for the future and you allow your character to maybe have a temporarily greater maximum stamina. So we'll just go to a maximum stamina rate here, and those things can be adjusted as needed. So here's a maximum stamina, which we have set to 10. If our stamina is greater than or equal to our maximum stamina, so therefore we are at our max right now, what do we want to do? Well, we are going to basically stop doing anything with our timers. So what we want to do is we want to clear our timer by handle, grab our timer handle and drop it in, and we'll go ahead and hit save. Now if you're using a newer version of Unreal Engine, you'll find if you do clear timer, it's actually been named to clear and invalidate timer by handle. Same thing, it's going to perform the same way for our purposes. So just keep that in mind. As long as it says clear timer in the name, you're fine. So what we're going to do now is if we're at maximum stamina, let's go ahead and clear out our timer. One issue here is I'm not clamping. Now, I'm not going to worry about clamping, but that's something to keep in mind. You should always, again, do validation. Let's say, for example, if I'm adding more than my maximum stamina, I'm not checking my cap here. I'm not clapping to my maximum stamina, maybe my default max, something like that. Something I should be doing, but for this purpose, we're not going to do it. That's something for you to implement based on how you want your game to work. Maybe you want to allow a little bit of an over stamina, an overcharge if the player builds their character right. You never know. So now that we have this set up where if we're at full, we now stop increasing our stamina, we need to know what we're going to do if we are not full. Well, if we're not full, we want to do what we did before. We want to increase our stamina. So let's name this properly. Not increase health, but increase stamina. And set our timer handle again. We'll go ahead and print out for debug purposes. Now, before I mentioned we should be clearing before we set to be safe, but we had no way of doing that because we didn't have a handle. Now that we have a handle, we're going to go ahead and implement that properly. Drag our handle in, clear by handle, Go and just drop this nicely into here and organize this. And now it's a little bit safer. Instead of having multiple stamina handles running at the same time, we're going to have one. Now your system, you may want to implement two. One for increase and one for decrease, so they're constantly running. My system that I've designed here is you either are decreasing stamina or increasing stamina. I don't want them running at the same time. So I'm having one handle, clearing that handle before I set a new timer to make sure I'm always running one timer at a time for stamina. Now, like I mentioned before we set it, we should clear it. So let's go ahead back here and drop this little sucker in right here. And there we go. We have that set up. We can use the arrow keys to move things smoothly. And then if you also remember, we have one other part right here where we are setting that we should also clear. And again, this is one of those sanity checks. I've determined I only want one timer running, so I'm only going to allow one timer running at a time. And that's why we have that there. Okay. So now, our biggest question here is, when are we calling increase health? Well, increase stamina. We're decreasing it whenever we're sprinting, but we need to now increase it whenever we stop sprinting. So that's something we need to figure out. Where should that go? Well, that should go whenever we basically stop sprinting. Up here in our toggling sprint part right here, if we are sprinting, we go ahead and we check and we set our function to sprint and we decrease stamina. So over here, we need to do this basic part right here. We'll copy and paste and hook it up. Move it over a little, put in a node. Try to organize it better. There we go. And we're going to, if we are not sprinting, we'll run the false branch. We will clear the handle. We will set the timer, increase stamina. Set it to go at 1 second. Now here's one of those things. This is where you determine how your game is run. Right now, when we stop sprinting, we're going to wait 1 second and then our timer is going to start and we're going to start increasing our stamina. So you're going to have to wait at least 1 second after you stop sprinting before your stamina goes back up. This is a design decision. This is so that way a player can't start sprinting, stop sprinting, start sprinting, stop sprinting, and try to work the stamina system. I'm going to require them to at least wait 1 second. It also coincides with the fact that after we run this, we want to run the reverse. We want to run our timeline backwards like before, so they slow down over 1 second before we get stamina to increase. Now, when we run increased stamina, everything should be good. We should go ahead and add stamina to the max, and it should continue. Let's run this. Let's see what we've broken. We'll hit shift. Stamina should be going down in the top left. And I fall off the edge, so that didn't help. Let's try this again. Let's not move. We'll watch the timer go down. After 10 seconds, we're now at 0 stamina. Now, we have a bug, and we probably should fix it. What happens if the player runs out of stamina automatically? What if decreasing stamina, right here, they run out of stamina? Right now, we're just simply telling them to stop walking, and they're kind of stuck. Well, we need to, hopefully, you know what we're going to do. Clear our timer handle. And set timer by function. 1 second. Increase stamina. And go ahead and save. Now, when they run out of stamina and we set their speed back to walk, we'll automatically start the increased stamina timer for them. We'll go ahead and hit play. We'll watch our countdown timer. They should go down. They should stop. And now it should start increasing. And if you notice, it started counting back up. And it went 4 and 8 because we have our increase set to go by 4s. I hit sprint. And we should start sprinting again. And you notice it's now counting down. You'll also notice we are at a much higher number than 10 because, again, I didn't clamp. We're walking. Our stamina goes up to our maximum. You notice our numbers stop because it doesn't increase anymore. We'll hit shift again. And there's a small bug. For whatever reason, after we are starting again, so I sprint, I stop sprinting, our number goes back up. I start sprinting again, our numbers go down. I stop sprinting, our numbers should be going up. I start sprinting again, our numbers are going down. I stop sprinting. Now our issue is, if we stop sprinting, in this case right here, and we let our numbers go all the way up, when I hit shift again, no, actually it's working fine. It's just our ramp up and ramp down is giving me a little bit of, I keep forgetting we have our little ramp up and of course falling off. So right now we have a working system. Now I'm actually starting to get annoyed at our non-clamping part here, so I'm going to take back what I said and I'm going to clamp this. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to run this through a clamp. Our value is going to come in. Our minimum is going to be 0, which is our minimum, and our maximum is going to be our maximum stamina value. And that is what we will set in here. Now, after I add stamina, no matter what, it's going to clamp between the minimum and the maximum. Technically, we should have a clamp down here as well. I'm also, because I'm extremely annoyed at not seeing zeros, going to do this. Put a print string at the end here, and we'll need a print string here so we can see our final value. And now hopefully we don't have those annoying non-parts. So now we have 8, 6, 4, 2, and we should have 0. Now we're at 0, 4, 8, 10. Now we can actually see things going down properly. Now if you notice there, we had a small little bug. This will decrease down. Once it goes down to 0, it's going to start regenerating automatically. 4, 8, 10. Now I'm walking. I hit shift to sprint, and it shows 10, and then it immediately throws me back to a walk. Why is that? We are here, toggling sprint. Check to see if we have enough stamina. We do. We run our set timer function name, and we run it through here. We check to see if, here's our stamina drain. So actually we have a small bug we need to figure out. And it only does it if we're at full. Drain this down, let it go back up. I'm walking, I hit shift. See, it's going down, I'm fine. Let's let it drain. It'll go back up. While walking, we hit shift and it goes back. So when our increased stamina runs through here, we clamp at our max. If we're at our max, we clear our timer handle and we print it out. The next time we're at max and we run through toggling the sprint, we check to see if we have enough. It's printing out the decrease stamina right here. So our question here is, when it prints it out, what is it printing out? So we'll put a branch right there. We'll hit shift. We'll let it go down. We will resume. It'll go down. And it's going to check this every time it goes down until we get down to 0, which is where we want to be. Now we'll increase back up. Now I'll hit shift to start running again. We hit 10, and you notice it never goes down again. Our decrease is never getting called the second time. So when we do this right here, okay, so there we go. That is where our problem is coming from. When I hit the shift button in our controller here, see, this is going to be an issue we're going to run into with the way we've implemented this. The first time I hit the shift button, we're running our flip-flop here. We are toggling our sprint. The next time I run it, we are toggling our sprint. And this flip-flop here controls whether or not we are pressing or releasing. The problem is, when I'm in here, and I tell it to stop, we're not telling our flip-flop it needs to flip. It's still stuck in the other position. So because we implemented our flip-flop here to do this, toggling back and forth, we're running into an issue here where when the next time we toggle sprint, it still thinks it's in the other position. So we're saying, go ahead and sprint, and then we're never telling it, okay, go ahead and stop sprinting. So we need to fix this somehow. And that's going to come into effect here, whether or not we have some way of telling our controller that the character's sprinting or not. So let's go and add a new variable called isSprinting. We'll go ahead and set this to the default of false. We'll move this over here. We'll go ahead and plug our isSprinting into here, like that. And what we're going to do with our flip-flop is we'll still want to go, let's see, we're going to want to set isSprinting to the opposite of what it is now, like this. Let's move this out of the way. Let's move this over. Let's set this to here, like this. Okay. So off the top of my head, what we're going to do here is if we push the button, it's going to flip-flop back and forth. Do we even need the flip-flop anymore? We do not need the flip-flop anymore, because we're going to manually flip-flop the sprinting right here. So basically we're going to press it. It's going to check if we're sprinting. Default we're not. It's going to flip it. It's going to turn the not into a true. It's going to say we are sprinting, and it's going to toggle the sprint. The next time we go through, it's going to see we are sprinting, flip it into a false, and then toggle the sprint off. Now we have a way, by getting our controller, to set the sprint button, the sprint variable, to the opposite of what it is, which will be false in this case in our character. So what we need here is this part right here, where we are forcing our player to stop sprinting. We need to move this code over. We need to get the controller, which is getting our player controller. That's right here. And we're going to see, if we did it this way, we'd have to cast to the controller, and then we'd have to isSprinting, get the isSprinting variable. Let's go ahead and just do a player interface. We already have a controller interface here. We'll call one, we'll do set isSprinting. We want a new input variable called isSprinting. And we'll go ahead and save it. Assuming I spelled that right. Okay, looks like I did. We'll go back into our controller. We will do compile to make sure we have our new change. Set isSprinting event. And all we're going to do here is set variable. Boom, that's it. Now anything can get a hold of the controller, and through the interface call set isSprinting and set the local isSprinting variable. Go back to our character. Set isSprinting. We'll send a message over to our controller and tell it we are no longer sprinting. And boom, we should have fixed that error. Obviously we should test, but we don't have that cast here. That's the nice thing about using interfaces. We're just saying, hey player controller, go ahead and set your isSprinting to false. We'll test this again. Watch our timer run down. It goes to 0. It should go 4, 8, 10. Now we're going to go ahead and hit, we're walking. We're going to go ahead and hit shift. We're at running, and our speed is running down. We will walk again. It goes up. Run. Walk. And you notice we still have our sprinting up and sprinting down. You'll notice when we hit 0, we immediately stop because, well, not stop, but we go to walk. And our stamina goes up and down as we need to properly. Cool. We have one small thing left to do. I hate the fact that this video is running long, but I wanted to make sure this was complete. I wanted to make sure that we had things explained well, and we ran into a small little issue, and we resolved it. Right now we want to get some form of interface showing our sprinting. Let's go ahead and just set up a value on the screen. We already have a user interface called HUD. Let's go ahead and add a text box over here. We'll anchor it to the bottom right. We'll go ahead and set it 0, 0 for our position. Now our alignment's going to be the bottom right, so we can make sure it's always anchored. So our X is going to be 1, and our Y is going to be 1. So now we have it anchored literally in the bottom right. Let's stop that. There we go. Let's look at our score over here, and we'll find it's 25, 25. We'll go over here and we'll do 25, 12. That's negative 25, negative 25. There we go. So now the two of them are going to be offset from 25 units in the corner. We have bold 32. Actually, we can copy our font value, go back over here and paste our font value, and boom, we have duplicates. Make sure it's set to size to content, and there we go. Now they look the same. Let's name this, what is this? Stamina text block. Boom, we're good there. Now let's go ahead and create an interface for this. We've created interfaces for other things. Let's go ahead and create an interface for our HUD. So we'll go ahead and create a blueprint interface, and we'll call this one our HUD BPI. And we'll open it up, and what we're going to do here is set stamina value. Set stamina display value. Try to keep it nice and wordy, to the point, something, I can't think of it. We're going to pick a new value for our input name, and it'll be a text. This will make it super simple. Go back to our HUD. Let's go ahead and go to our graph and our settings. Add this as an interface, HUD blueprint interface. Compile and save. Hopefully this should all be second nature at this point. And that one was the update. Update? What did I call that? Set stamina display value. Wow, that probably should have been named better. But it's not. And of course I set stamina. There we go. So why is this not working? Stamina display. I'm not calling the function, I'm trying to set the event. Here's our HUD. Here's our HUD blueprint interface. Set stamina display value. New value. Here's our HUD. Class settings. HUD blueprint interface. Okay, we are good. Oh, because make sure when you're doing an actual event, you're in the event graph and not in a function. So let's try this for the third time. And event set stamina display value. There we go. There's our nice little red node. And all we have to do here is go back to our designer, make this a variable for our stamina. We're going to go to our stamina and get it. We're going to set the text on it. And we're just simply going to pass our values. And clean it up a little bit because cleanliness counts. There we go. Something like that. That's looks horrible. There we go. There we go. Now all we have to do is call the set stamina display value through the interface, and it's going to simply change what we see on our screen. We can now go back to anywhere the words just failed miserably there. Now we can go back to when we are adjusting our stamina, and we can go ahead and set the value. So we can go back to our character. Is our character getting our HUD? Yes, we have our create HUD here in our character. And we have a value. Oh, that's our crosshair widget. Where is our HUD widget? Oh, we might have a trouble here. Oh, our HUD widget's in our controller. So we have a little bit of a conundrum here. Because of the way we designed this, where our controller controls the HUD values, the character doesn't really have access to that. So our HUD can be updated, but we need access to the HUD reference. Now we can either ask the controller for the reference and go through there, or we could have the controller keep track of it, or we could pass through from the character to the controller. So this is one of those instances where we kind of have a small issue here. Our controller shows what's on the screen, but our character holds our stamina. Let's go ahead and do this an easy way. We're simply going to pass values along because we're making it a little bit modular. If our controller doesn't have a stamina value on the screen, or our character doesn't have stamina, for example, we don't want things to fail. We want things to, well, they're going to fail, but we don't want them to fail in a crash. We want them to fail gracefully. So what we'll do here is by using interfaces and passing things along, if there is some part of the chain that doesn't support what we're trying to do, it's just simply going to not happen. So if our character doesn't have stamina, we're fine. If our controller doesn't have a HUD set up that has a stamina interface in it, we're fine. So that's the nice thing about this. So let's go into our controller, because our controller has our HUD widget, and we'll get our HUD widget. We're going to go ahead and set the stamina display value, and we're going to set it to whatever our new stamina display value is. Now, in order to call this, we need a way for our character to talk to the controller. And we already know how to do that. The controller has a blueprint interface, set is sprinting. So we'll go ahead and we'll do a set stamina update. We'll call this one update stamina display. Make it simple. Same thing we did before. We'll call this one a text. We'll call this one a text. Let's just call this one, let's call this new value. Make things simple. That way they pass through fairly simple. Now that our controller has an update stamina display, compile and save. We'll add the event stamina display. Hook things up. These things should look familiar. All we're doing is basically passing the same stuff from one thing to another. We'll call it like that. Now our character, if we can find him, should be able to talk to its controller and tell it to update the stamina display. So let's find where we are printing and update the display instead. So we're going to want to get the player controller, and we're going to go ahead and want to update the stamina display. And the nice thing about this is all we should have to do is take our stamina, plug it in, let it auto convert to a text, format this a little bit better like this, copy, here's a print, delete, paste. This is something that would probably be better in the macro or function, since you notice I'm copy pasting these 4 nodes multiple times. This would be an instance where if you put it into a macro or a function, it would be cleaner. We would have replaced 4 nodes with 1 node. So there we go. You'll notice I'm doing this for each place. So this is one good advantage of using the debugging. By using the debugging, I now know exactly where I need to replace. So we've done it in those 4 parts. Let's see what happens. I have a text block that says text block because I've never initialized it. We'll hit the sprint button. Now it says 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. Should count up to 10 and stop. Now I'm sprinting and we'll count down. Stop sprinting, it'll count back up. Start sprinting again, and you'll notice we now have a stamina display. You could, of course, drive, since we have a value, you could drive a progress bar. You could drive a little indicator of a image slowly fading from a full character sprinting down to something else. You can drive your sprinting values with a little picture. There's tons of things you can do. Now we're pretty much done here, with the exception of you should comment these out. This would be our increase stamina, and we move this down to get out of the way. This is going to be our decrease. I really cannot spell decrease stamina today. Decrease stamina section. We'll drag it out of the way. We've gone ahead and our sprint is now bigger. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Now there's our toggle sprint event. So now we have these 3 events handling sprinting, stamina, and increasing.